With almost 20 years between Maxine and Lloyd, the lines between what a standard brother and sister meant were definitely blurred.
Growing up, Mother and Dad actually had two families. Lloyd and I comprised the younger family, and all the other brothers and sisters were so much older that they were just almost like parents to Lloyd and I. It was like I grew up having three mothers. Maxine and Geneva wouldn't brook any nonsense.
Well, Lloyd and Rayford had a life variety out of the rest, upside the rest of us. I've always I told Dad when he was living, said he used me as practice, giving whippings. he'd tear me up pretty regular.
They were always getting into trouble. And many times when I was living at home, they would bring their friends by the house before they would let them go home because they'd been in trouble, maybe had a few blooded noses, many scars on them, and they'd come by for me to get them cleaned up before their friends would go home.
Was taking care of them when Mother started working at the cafe, and my job on Saturday was they're just like, they've always been just like my kids. I'd comb her hair, and I made them, they'd shine. And when we headed for the show, I didn't go to the show, but when carried them to put them in the theater, they're the best two looking kids in town. Take them and put them, had to go to one theater. There was two theaters in Quanah, and then when they'd get out of that, take them and they'd go to the other theater. I think it cost a dime to get in. I'm not sure. I know it wasn't much, but I couldn't get over how we could afford for them to go to a show every Saturday. That's what dumbfounded me.
Rayford Lloyd I was working around the cafe and they were going to school pretty young. They'd come down there after school without. They'd always be about the dirty dishes. I'd talk them into to wash them. After they washed them, I'd let them drive my car. And I bet they put 5,000 miles on that car, just in the back end of the cafe, around the water tower and out. There wasn't any traffic back there, just by themselves. They really enjoyed it, just loved it.
As each child grew older, they came to understand their parents in their own unique way. And the way a grown child speaks about their mom and dad often discloses more about the parent's character than almost anything else. And by the way, in this picture, Grandma is either teaching my dad Lloyd to play a kazoo or smoke a cigar. I am hoping it was the kazoo, but considering how much my dad loves cigars, it might have been a cigar.
Well, Dad was a good man, a hard-working man, really. And he was so busy and worked so hard that he couldn't give his kids time. He didn't have the time. Well, there wasn't that many hours a day. He taught us how to play dominoes and tried to teach us how to play baseball.
Dad loved games. He loved playing dominoes. He loved playing canasta. Whenever Aveley and I'd go visit, well, literally, we'd drive in the driveway, go in and give him and Mother a hug, and start unloading. And before we could get our suitcases in the car, Dad would have the canasta cards out, dealing them. He loved to play games. He liked to play dominoes, but he liked to play in sort of a competitive arena. He wanted someone of, I don't think you could ever say that you could find anyone who was his equal, but he liked to play with people who would at least give him a good game. And almost every afternoon at the cafe, if things got quiet, well, he'd go over to the domino parlor and play for a couple of hours and then come back.
But Mother stayed home. She did a lot of the baking. She baked the pies. And of course, we did a lot of pecan pies. But that was something else we did at home, too. We sat around the kitchen table at night and shelled pecans. There was no buying them already shelled. But Mother would make anywhere from 1 to 15 pies a day. And I don't know how she did it. But then she did, of course, the laundry was done on a rub board for a long time. She didn't have a washing machine. And she cooked. We didn't go out to eat. We had a hot meal every day. Now, our big meal was at noon. And then at night, we'd have sandwiches or cornbread milk or something like that. But we were always well fed.
You couldn't have a better mother than what she was. She loved all her kids. There wasn't a selfish bone in her. Most of the things she did was always for somebody else, not herself. She cooked and sewed and like working at baked pies and then go down there and work and then come home and wash and iron. And when I was working at the grocery store delivering groceries, this is before she started baking pies, you know. Well, that's when grocery stores still delivered. Well, on Saturday when I'd make my first delivery run, I'd carry every vegetable that they had at the store by there, and then I'd go back at noon and eat. Had be beans, squash, peas, corns, carrots, tomatoes.
Geneva, that's where she learned to beat Dad up. She had a baby, Sandra, and back then there wasn't such a thing as seat belts. And Sandra would always ride in the car right next to her. Well, anytime Geneva put the brake on, she'd reach over and hold Sandra up. It just came natural when she put the brake on to do like that. Well, anytime Dad was riding with her, she'd whack Dad. I don't know when she got over that. She may still do it. I don't know.
I think that just everything with the economy and the boys going in service, all of it together, Daddy his nerves just got the best of him. And he stayed in bed for quite some time. But he got over it. Same Daddy after that. And Daddy was always, you could always tell when Daddy was worried, though. He'd whistle. When Daddy started whistling, you knew that something was going on that wasn't right. But Mother and Daddy always got along good, and Daddy would come home and nothing would be said. So that was always nice.
But she was very competitive too. You play, I used to go every weekend, and sometime through the week over. As soon as I'd get there, she'd say, "Son, I think Maxine and Dan are expecting us to come out and play dominoes, or they're wanting us to." Well, they didn't care. They enjoyed it, but it wasn't always Maxine and Dan is wanting to. Mother wanted to. And Dan and I would always play her and Maxine, you know. And Dan, he'd always cheat a little bit, you know. We started home one night and Mother said, "I know y'all cheat, so I just hadn't been able to catch you."
But now, during the summertime, yes, or on Sundays, the cafe was closed on Sunday. And we ate our big meal at noon. We went to church went home, and all of us ate lunch before we did anything else. And there was always company there, usually. And Mother always had enough. But we did not have roast and fried chicken and all of that stuff every day like we do now. We we did a lot of meatloaf. We did a lot of soup. But then Mother and Daddy killed hogs. We had pork all the time. And Mother had chickens. But we'd have chicken and dumplings. And we always had plenty to eat.
Daddy was always very proud of his family. He didn't have unrealistic expectations, but he did want them to just do the very best that they could. But you could tell by listening to him and watching the expression on his face that he took a great deal of pride in his daughters and in his sons. And he was very supportive of anything that they did that was proper and right. He didn't go to church an awful lot when we were kids. Mother took all of us to church, but when I was a teenager, Dad decided that he needed to mend his ways. He was baptized, and from that point until he died, he was in church on a regular basis.
When Mother would fix lunch for him, he had to have lunch every day at 12 o'clock, straight up 12 o'clock. He could walk in, sit down at the table, and there'd always be a hot pan of cornbread there.
And it had to be made a certain way, but it had to be real brown, had to be fairly thin, and have a lot of butter. And of course, we had a cow, and we had our own milk and butter.
Dad had hot cornbread every day at lunch.
Raising a household of 7 children and keeping everything running smoothly required strict rules, traditions, and basic courtesies. Today, spanking might seem harsh in some circles, but it was a common practice throughout most of history. Keep in mind that for much of the 20th century, kids typically left home between 16 and 18, then got married and started families of their own. Also, nearly 20 million American men served in World War I and World War II. About half of those were under 25. People back then were simply tougher because life demanded it. Life was tougher. In the next section, you'll hear stories about that toughness, daily life, early independence, and my favorite one, my dad saying the dinner time prayer.
Of course, we didn't have cars. We walked back and forth to school. We didn't have sidewalks. We didn't have grass. We had a dirt on the ground, and Mother would sweep the dirt so we could play in the swings and not get dirty. George and Carl would fix wires from the trees down with rods on them so we could slide up and down the rods. And we got hurt occasionally, but basically we all played together real good. The people next door to us had a sidewalk, and we'd play jacks on it.
Anyway, Daddy was fair. He would, like I said, he was very strict. And I guess that was good for all of us.
Oh yeah, Daddy, when Daddy started whistling, we knew to be careful.
There was, I can't recall any set of circumstances when any of us were ever punished unjustly, but we were held to a standard, and we either met those standards or we had privileges taken away from us, or we had corporal discipline meted out. Mother would attempt to do the corporal discipline, but that usually resulted in us getting into a laughing situation more than we did a crying situation.
Of course, Quanah was such a little town. Everybody knew what everybody else was doing, and we had to be careful. If we did anything, somebody was going to tell Daddy, so then we'd be in trouble.
We learned independence at an early age. Mother and Dad expected us to do what was right. They didn't ever have to tell us to do what was right. My brothers and sisters always told us that to act like walkers. And so the expectations were always there. But I can recall that before I was, I think probably 10 or 11 years old, my parents had to go leave town for a week, and Lloyd and I stayed there. We took care of ourselves. I cooked the meals. I made sure that Lloyd got to school. And there was no question about whether we were going to be doing what we should do or not.
Church, we went to church and Sunday school every Sunday morning, went to church at Sunday night, went on Wednesday. And it was a small church, but we did vacation Bible school. We sat and listened. We kept our feet on the floor. One thing I can tell you about me, one time I sat with my feet against the pew. We didn't have individual pews, a long pew. I sat with my feet propped up against the pew in front of me. When we got home, Daddy said, "Okay, Menis," because he didn't call me Geneva, he called me Menis. "Okay, Menis, get you a cloth." And I said, "What kind of a cloth?" "Get you a damp cloth." I said, "Well, how big?" "About like a washcloth." I said, "Okay." I said, "And what are we going to do?" He said, "We're going to church." I said, "To church?" "Yes. You're going to go wash the back of that pew that you had your feet up against." So we went back to the church building, and I never did put my feet on the pew in front of me again.
Lloyd and I shared after we got old enough, we actually moved out of the house, and Mother let us fix up a bedroom out in a shed out in the backyard. So we made our bedroom, our bunkhouse, out in that shed. And summer and winter, no air conditioning. We did have electricity out there, but just if it got too hot, we just opened we didn't have glass windows. We had windows on shutters that swung out, and we'd open the shutters and let the breeze blow through.
And then we played together, but Daddy would make them do things. Daddy kept a pretty good eye on them. And Mother was strict, but we could always get around Mother, but we couldn't get around Daddy. But we couldn't do anything without both of their approvals. Daddy had the cafe. If we wanted to do something, we had to walk to the cafe and ask permission. Daddy'd say, "Go home and ask your mother." Then we'd have to walk back to the cafe again. And it was only about, we lived on 7th. The cafe was on 2nd. It's only about 5 blocks, but at that time to us it seemed like a long way. So we spent many a day, many hour walking back and forth.
He had a very firm hand. I can recall many situations where Lloyd and I were just almost in fear of what was going to take place. Dad worked hard. He got up early in the morning. Usually he was at work at the cafe before 4:30 in the morning. And he didn't come home until the last customer left at night. But when he came home, if there was something that needed to be imparted in the way of discipline, he would take care of it.
For the girls, the way Daddy disciplined us, he would sit in a chair and make us come sit in his lap. I never, ever remember Daddy spanking me. But I would a lot rather have had a spanking than have him make me sit in his lap and have a lecture. Now, he did spank the boys, and Carl was a problem at times, and he was pretty hard on Carl. He wasn't as hard on Rayford and Lloyd as he was on us. By the time they came along, they had all mellowed quite a bit. And then I guess we probably stepped in and kind of kept them from getting in trouble.
Lloyd and a couple of friends of his went quail hunting and had good luck. They killed quite a few quail, came back home, and Mother was going to cook them for lunch. And the table there at home was kind of like our table in here. I had 2 chairs up against the wall, one on each end, 2 on the other side. And Lloyd was sitting at the end of the table. Dad was sitting right next to him, just around the corner. And so Mother had the quail all cooked, set them out there. And Lloyd's friend was there. And Dad said, Lloyd, would you say the blessing? And Lloyd said, okay. He said, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the one that eats the fastest gets the most. When he said that, Dad didn't smile. He didn't say a word. He just reached up with the back of his hand like this and whacked Lloyd right on the chest, knocked him completely over, turned the chair over. Lloyd fell partly into the other room. He got up. Dad, nobody was saying a word. He got back and pulled his chair up the table. Dad said, Lloyd, would you say the blessing? And he did. A nice one.